Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to yet another episode of BSN 716's very own BuffaHolics. And today, I have another special guest on the show to talk Bills draft, to talk general manager versus head coach, to talk anything else that we could possibly wrap our minds around. And that's none other than Mr. A. Rich from Trendsetters. And the saying goes, if you don't know him, get to know him. How you doing today, A. Rich?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. How you doing, buddy? How you doing? Glad,
Uh,
glad to be a part of the show.
Glad to have you on, man. Glad to have you on. I'm trying to get a little consecutive streak going with getting two minds instead of one on this show. So hopefully that pays off for all the listeners and they enjoy it. So with that said, let's get this thing going. Let's get the ball rolling. I know you had a couple of topics you wanted to speak on. I believe the first topic we wanted to discuss was who really had the priority or who had the control in terms of the draft this year. Was it McDermott? Was it former general manager Doug Whaley? Let listeners have your take on it, Rich.
Well, I always thought that it was always interesting between the two who was running the show, between Whaley, between Doug McDermott. I always felt that it was Sean McDermott. Excuse me. I always felt it was Sean McDermott because the way the organization was being run, it was something that we haven't seen in the past. It was something that we wasn't used to as fans and as an organization. And being that Doug Whaley's been there, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, since 2010, we got an idea of his philosophies, his ideologies, and how he likes to run things, run his organization. So when Sean McDermott came in, it was like a breath of fresh air. We knew that someone else was running this organization. And even though Doug Whaley had that GM title and people was probably conflicted on who was running the show, I felt that the writing was on the wall, and Sean McDermott was definitely running the show because of what was going on, the new tendencies going on in one Bills draft.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you on that one. I think it was abundantly clear, not only with everything leading up to the draft, but the draft pick and the draft process in general. Now, one of the first things, you got to think about when this whole topic arises is, yes, General Manager Doug Whaley has now been relieved of his duties as of yesterday. Today, it's obviously the first of the month, so some listeners hearing this might have it on a different day, but as of, I believe it was the 30th of April, General Manager Doug Whaley was relieved of his duties. With that said, there's a lot of controversy in terms of why did they wait so long? Why didn't they do it, previously? And a lot of the experts or a lot of the main show hosts, whether it's on Good Morning or Good Morning Football or even NFL Network, they kept the consistency on that. You're not going to fire a guy or a whole scouting department right when they're in the middle of their job. So that's something to keep in mind. The Pagulas wanted to
Right.
get everything they could out of what Whaley and out of what his whole scouting department had leading up to the draft, leading into free agency. Because for what it's worth, even before McDermott was in and even before Rex was in, Whaley did a fairly decent job in terms of bringing in free agents, in terms of, drafting guys who maybe weren't expected to have such success. You
Right.
look at his one miss, and that was EJ Manuel. And a lot of speculation was that, you really couldn't have had a better quarterback in that draft because it was just a poor draft. But the speculation always goes, draft a quarterback every year till you get it right. So I don't think that should fall on him as much. But what you keep in mind is there was the rumors when they traded up for Sammy, they didn't like the idea. Doug Marrone didn't like the idea, and maybe Whaley fell into place with that. And I think you'll wait to see until Watkins is gone that how well that pans out. Because granted, in the last segment I mentioned how he's had an injury-ridden career so far in Buffalo. So
Right.
I think you have to keep that in mind when you talk about it. But looking at the perspective of this year's draft, you look at the free agency. Two former Carolina Panthers come into Buffalo. They get a couple defensive players like a Micah Hyde, like a Jordan Poyer. But then you see them do something that, like you said, it was very uncharacteristic of the Bills. And I'm not saying is it a bad thing. I'm saying it was a good thing, because you see they traded away that 10th pick with Kansas City to move to the 27th pick. And you hit it right on the nose when you said that was a possible trade option. You got almost every detail right. The one thing you really didn't get right, but there's no reason that you should have gotten it wrong was the 2018 that they gained, that first round pick. So, you had the trade partner right, you had everything of that aspect right. You just didn't get the details of the trade. But I'm not holding that against you. I'm just saying you were spot on with it because it was abundantly clear with the connection that McDermott and Reed had. So that's the one thing that plays a role on that. And you keep that in mind, and you saw that, they traded 17 picks back to get a top 2 cornerback in the draft. McDermott, in my opinion, was running the shots. Whether he consulted Whaley or, they didn't even, is another question, because we don't know what we don't know what happened. The reports are going to go this way and that way with everything. And maybe we won't know until Doug Whaley breaks the news and says, I wasn't as involved as I was in previous years. They really gave the reins to McDermott. And if that is the case, if that does in fact happen, I will question why Pegula said that they were all doing it together, because, I think Terry carried himself well in his conference from previous conferences, like a lot of people have said, but the main consistency was he used process 3 or 4 times in his entire press conference. So that just made me think, they're really all about Sean McDermott. And once again, not a bad thing. I'm all about it as well. It's just, it's a different regimen, like I've always said since McDermott came in, that is coming through One Bills Drive.
Right. It's definitely a different regimen, and we have to think about who we have as owners. We have the Pagulas, hockey people, am I right? We have hockey owners that's recently come to be football owners. And when you're football owners, you're not necessarily football people. We appreciate that the fact that you let Buffalo stay in Buffalo, but you have to have some trust in somebody in your circle to run your show. And Doug Whaley, Russ Brandon, they was the guys at One Bills Drive running the show at the time. So Terry and Kim Pegula had no trust but to put their trust into those guys, into that staff, into that front office personnel, because they never been there. So now it's a couple of years past and we haven't made the playoffs and they see the dysfunction. Now you can have a better idea on and a better view on what's going on. Why? Because you've been with the organization a number of years. You see there's changes that needs to be made, and now you can make the necessary changes now that you've been there a couple of years and you got to see with your own 2 eyes.
No, definitely. I think you hit it right on the point. Terry reiterated, not only was it him and Kim's decision to, let Doug go, but, on top of that, he obviously looked broken up about it. He showed and said numerous times that he enjoyed working with Doug, but they decided that they wanted to go, in a different direction and one other thing he emphasized was that this was the first time they were going to be able to choose their general manager, because you think when they came in, Doug was already there. Russ was already there. Doug was already there. And they were given the reins with those, the president and the general manager. So now they get the opportunity to go out and find their GM. And like the reports are saying, I do believe one of the head guys is going to be a Carolina Panther exec or whatever the case is because of Sean McDermott. It's abundantly clear that he is being given complete reign. And that's a 360 from what they were previously doing. And maybe they realized that if that's the case, if you're not getting past the hump you want to get past with this organization, with this football team, maybe you need to give the coach full reins or more opportunities that you were previously giving them. You see what New England can do, and sure, we don't like talking about New England, but I'm going to be honest when I say they are a franchise that knows what to do and has been doing it for the last decade and a half. And so when you give a coach like Sean McDermott, who is proving his worth as a first-year coach and showing that he has what it takes, I'm loving every minute of it, whether it's his press conferences, whether it's his draft picks, which I think he completely hit on. I mean, overall, like I said in the previous show, I think that was a B-plus draft at least in terms of the position needs and everything of that nature. And his free agency was addressed well. I mean, I think this GM is going to be, like I said, part of a Panthers exec, and it was, I their their current general manager, I think they have assistant and they have a general manager and assistant GM, and I think their assistant GM is the one that's rumored to get the position. So McDermott has that relationship with him, so he can build on that, and they'll be coming with the same idea of let's both do this together. It's both our first years. We have an organization that has what it takes. We have owners that want to give us the opportunity to do whatever we please to get us past that hump. And I think it's abundantly clear, and it will reflect properly and successfully on behalf of them.
Right. And I feel that what choice did Doug Whaley give the owners, Terry and Kim Pagula? He hasn't produced a winning product on the field. In comes, let's start from Doug Marrone. Doug Marrone, he was a decent coach, but he probably wasn't a likable guy. Rex Ryan comes in, he was probably a likable guy, but he just wasn't the head coach. Now Sean McDermott comes in, he's a likable guy. He sustains consistency. He appears to be a very good head coach. So Sean McDermott seems to have all the tools that prior head coaches that came in within our organization lacked. He's a 5-tool player, as I like to call it. I use a baseball term. And because of that, I feel that the Pagulas took that into consideration, and now they want to put their full trust into Sean McDermott because they've seen what Whaley can do. So I believe it's definitely Sean McDermott running this show. I want to ask you a question. I want to get your take on a situation that you brought up earlier.
Yeah, sure.
Sammy Watkins in this situation with the 5th-year option, you're getting a lot of gripe over from fans over the organization not picking up the 5th-year option. How do you feel with that situation with Sammy Watkins? We know he's a talented player, but at the same time, you have to be on the field to help the team. So give me your take on Sammy Watkins and us possibly not picking up that 5th-year option.
Yeah, like I said on my on the previous segment, I know Cody and I discussed this a little, or Fathead, what they call him over on Cheap Seats. Excuse me. I think a lot of people are diving more into it than they should. I think it's something obviously where there's currently 1 day left on the option, and chances are if they haven't done it now, I don't think you'll see them do it. And I really want to know how Watkins reacts to that, whether it's social media or even meeting with the media. But I don't think it's something as critical as everyone's making it clear, and I don't think that the Zay Jones draft has any clear effect on it or any correlation to it. I think they just drafted a guy who was available where they know they needed a wide receiver, even on top of Andre Holmes, and you go out and you get him and you trade up 4 or 5 spots for that. Don't lose a lot on it, but you got to keep in mind, if they don't 5th-year option Sammy, they have the opportunity to roll out with him for the rest of the season. If he has a stellar year, they can throw a franchise tag on him. But I think if they see that halfway through the year he's doing what it takes, I'm sure they're going to get a contract ready to him and get it sent over to his agent, whether it's a 2-year, 3-year, 4-year. I think I think the McDermott era is not going to put all the pennies in the bank yet.
Right.
They're going to see how much they have and what it's going to take to do that. But I think you're more so seeing a sense of patience around the franchise now. And it's weird to say that because they're rushing, because they just got rid of their GM, but you look at it from the perspective that McDermott, he's a guy that's saying, Tyrod's got to compete again for this position. I don't think there's a problem with that. I think it's good for everyone on the team. I think also, saying, we're not sure what we're still assessing the 5th-year option on Sammy. It's all a patient, mentality. They're not rushing this. They're not, deciding the wrong thing too quick or deciding the right thing too quick. They're just taking the time and they're letting the process take care of itself. So I don't think it's a huge deal. Like I said, I mentioned in the previous segment or the previous episode of BuffaHolics with Cody that it wasn't something that could weigh huge into fans' reactions. You've seen a lot of times where players have 2, 3, 4 years before they really get into their cycle of being a professional in the league. And once again, patience. Bills really haven't had patience. Whaley went 35 and 30 or 33 and 35 as a general manager. He was one of few that got the patient kind of mentality, but Pagula, with the turnover of Rex and then Sean's bringing in the patient's mentality, and I think it's something that's positive and that Buffalo has needed for a long time. And in whatever aspect the character of that coach is, they're bringing, the trust, the process, have patience. And I think you're going to see that correlate over to the Sabres as well. I think they're going to want to find a coach who maybe might be not have a proven, track sheet like Bilisma did. And they might look at a first year, second year coach. They might look at a general manager who has had success. They might look for an inexperienced coach and an experienced general manager. I think it's a balance of both worlds. I think that's what they need. And we can always keep going on these topics. I do want to take a quick break for all the listeners here. So you're listening to BSN BuffaHolics, and we'll be right back after a quick break to discuss more of this topic. Yeah, that was good. We'll just I'll just circle right back in, and we'll talk. Just give me 1 second. I gotta take a call.
Cool.
All right, man. I'm good to go. If you are. You good to go, Akeem?
Yes, sir. I'm good.
All right, so I'll just introduce us obviously again, and we'll just jump right back into the topic, and I'll obviously let you take the floor as well. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, BuffaHolics. Welcome back to yet again another episode of BSN 716 Radio's BuffaHolics. We have a special guest yet again today, none other than A. Rich from Trendsetters, and his motto is, and it always will be, if you don't know him, get to know him.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Hey, Rich, Akeem Richens. I'm excited to be on the show once again. BuffaHolics is one of my favorite shows, man. I see you do a lot of work. You get a lot of fan interaction, and deservingly so. I'm just glad to be a part of it.
Oh man, love to have you on board. Love to have you, and I definitely love what you're doing over at Trendsetters too, man. You're on point with everything. But with that said, let's not waste any more time for these fans listening right now to get back into what we were discussing before. But real quick before we do that, I just want to let everyone know listening right now, if you haven't already, make sure you download the new BSN 716 app in the Google Play Store or Apple Store, and make sure you also go follow the BSN Network on Twitter. You follow us at BuffaHolics on Twitter and Instagram, and you also follow Trendsetters on Instagram. And that is at BSN 716 for the network, at BSN BuffaHolics for the Twitter and Instagram for us here, and then I believe yours is at Trendsetters.
At Trendsetters BSN.
At Trendsetters BSN. So make sure you follow all those media outlets to stay up to date with everything we got going on. I know myself and A. Rich always stay up to date on Instagram, at least with reports that break or anything of that nature. But without any further ado, let's jump right back into what we were discussing before the break. I know you asked me, my opinion on the whole Watkins fifth year option. I was able to relay a little bit of that. I was able to relay a little bit of what I think the Pagulas will do with the Sabres in terms of having a potential experienced general manager and an inexperienced head coach to kind of balance it out. I think you'll see that with the Bills as well. Like I said, I believe the Panthers assistant general manager will be a top candidate and is reported to be a top candidate for the position. But I'd also like to hear your take on the whole fifth year option with Watkins, and if you buy into the hype or if you think the hype is too much from the fans in the aspect of not making a big deal about it right now, even before the preseason or season has started, or seeing how healthy Watkins is.
We all know Sammy Watkins is an unbelievable talent. We all know Sammy Watkins been an unbelievable talent since he's been with Clemson, since his days with the Clemson Tigers. He's come to Buffalo. He's had one season over 1,000 yards. We see his talent. We see his potential. But at the same time, it's been injury riddled. We cannot give a guy a fifth year option. We can't pick up a fifth year option based on potential. I believe Sean McDermott is doing the right thing. There's nobody above anybody on this team, whether it's Sammy Watkins or whether it's Walt Powell. It's about the team first. And we love your potential. We love your talent, but we don't know how healthy you can be. and your talent and your potential is not useful if you're hurt. It's not useful if you can't be productive on the football field. So I definitely think Sean McDermott is doing a wise move by, if he decides to decline on that 5th year option. A lot of people may say, oh, Sammy Watkins may get mad and may get mad at the organization, and that may force him to leave. And with a lot of other guys, it may appear to be. But Sammy Watkins is the type of guy Sean McDermott loves. Sammy Watkins is a high character guy. Sammy Watkins is not a flamboyant guy. He's not a guy that with an attitude. Let's face it, he's not like an Odell Beckham mentality. He's not like a Des Bryant mentality. We're talking about a high character guy that understands how this business works, and he understands what the new coach is trying to implement. So I don't believe that Sammy Watkins would be mad at the organization for looking out what's best for us, the organization. So if Sammy Watkins comes in and do what he has to do as a football player, he will get his long-term contract, or he'll get franchised, or we'll do whatever we have to do to make sure he remains a Buffalo Bill.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that one. I think, Sammy is a complete opposite of Odell, and not taking anything away from Odell because he's a very talented athlete as well. But like you said, I think Sammy's humble. He knows the talent he has, but he also knows that he hasn't been able to showcase it like he expected to when he came in year 1, year 2, year 3. And I said on the show the other day, a lot of that or some of that played a role in the quarterbacks he had throwing to him, because I've always said that you could throw Sammy, if he stays healthy, to the Giants and have, if not an identical career that Odell has had so far, or potentially even a little bit better. But if you do that with Odell, I don't think you see him have the same success he has in New York that everyone thinks he potentially could have in Buffalo because of the quarterback position. Eli is a quarterback that, he's not always going to have, a 300-yard game all the time, but he's going to be the quarterback that gets the star wide receiver the ball, that can get it past the D-back, that can facilitate the game, unlike the types of quarterbacks Sammy has had to deal with. Whether it's a Jeff Toole, a Thad Lewis, a Kyle Orton for 1 year, and then taking a hike. And with Tyrod, I think he's got to build that consistency. And whether it's Tyrod, whether it's Peterman, Cardell, Yates, whoever the case is, I don't think that's an issue as much anymore because of the mentality that McDermott is giving the franchise, that he's giving the team, that he's giving the players. And like you said, if Sammy goes out and does his job and plays the game that he loves to play and puts up the numbers he can put up, he's going to collect on another contract, with us. They're gonna reevaluate everything, and they're gonna say he's a good guy, he's a talented guy. We can't lose him. There's no reason we should lose him when you draft a guy like Zay Jones in the 2nd round, and you can potentially have a crazy 1-2 threat. And then you have an Andre Holmes, who is a number 3 receiver in Oakland, who could potentially be a number 2 receiver here with good stats as well. So I don't buy into the hype. Like you said, it's ludicrous to just pay him or to give him that 5th-year option without seeing what the table is this year. He could, one of two things are going to happen. He's going to have a great year and be injury-free for most of it, or he's going to have a mediocre year and get injured. I mean, I think it's one of two ways, but I don't buy into the hype that, the fans need to start freaking out when we don't do that 5th-year option, because it's most likely not going to happen. Now, on the other side of things, if he starts going out and putting up, average wide receiver numbers or stats, and he's winning, he's going to love it even more, because you think about last year, he said he's not used to the losing environment. And that's something that McDermott has said first and foremost. He gets rid of the pool table. He gets rid of the video games. He says, you guys have to earn that. If you're coming in on a Monday and you just lost to Miami by 1 point, you shouldn't have the luxury to play these video games. Yes, it builds, team unity, but you have a job to do. You're getting paid to play the game you love in a professional environment, and you want to win. You want to have that opportunity to make the playoffs, to make a run at playoffs, make a run even, I'm not going to say it's going to happen, but make a run at the Super Bowl. That's the end game with any NFL franchise. And when you have that, if Sammy starts winning, he's not going to care whether he's getting. I believe that as long as he's getting at least 8 touches a game, and they're doing what it takes to win, to put points on the board, he's not going to have a quarrel with it. If it's on the opposite side and he does get all the targets and they still do win, he's going to have an even bigger field day and enjoy it even more. So it's going to speak not only to Sammy, but it's going to speak to the philosophy that they're trying to build, whether it's Terry, Kim, Sean, Russ, Brandon, anything of that nature. They're going to be the ones building that culture. And I think it's a culture that was needed. And I think it's a culture that can finally have what it takes to break that playoff drought. I've speculated a couple times, and call me crazy, call me Mr. Ironic, whatever you want to call me. 17 years is the playoff drought currently. It's 2017. They traded back 17 spots for the 27th pick. I mean, I roll it in my favor. That's how I always am. That's the way I look at it. But I'm also not going to say, this is the year we win the Super Bowl. In order to get to the Super Bowl, you have to make playoffs. So if you're one, you make playoffs and you lose first round, okay, come back stronger than ever next year. Bring back the same roster you have. Bring back the same quarterback, the same running back, coach, defensive scheme, everything of that nature. Stay consistent, because that is one thing that in the last 4 years since Terry and Kim actually, acquired the Bills franchise, inconsistency has been the main theme for so long, whether it's the quarterback position, whether it's a head coach, whether it's, general manager and head coach, headbutting, whether it's, your defense going from a 4-3 or going to a 3-4, whatever the scenario is, it's just very inconsistent. And you saw that in part with the Sabres as well, where they got these draft picks that were supposed to be, the game changers, and they got these young studs in the lineup that were supposed to help make a winning season, and you don't see that happen because your head coach or your general manager, this and that, is getting overturned and changed. And I've said from day one of this segment, I've always said the Bills need to be consistent, and I think that is something that McDermott brings into the light that he can offer and will offer for the franchise.
Definitely, man. And I also feel we have to do what these players do best. We know Sammy Watkins has to stay healthy, but at the same time, I would like to utilize what he does best. In Clemson, Sammy Watkins got a lot of his yards after the catch. It was consists of a lot of slants, a lot of screens. Get the ball in Sammy Watkins' hands and let him go to work. I believe that's a strength in his game that since he came to the NFL has been completely ignored under Greg Roman and his offense. He barely ran screens. He barely ran things of that nature. And we know Sammy Watkins can run the entire route tree, but we want to always, I feel we should always want to do what their player does best. And I feel that was ignored from the offensive coordinator. I also feel that we've had guys playing out of position for so long. Rex Ryan, he got Sammy Watkins. I don't think he utilized what he did best. Shaq Lawson is better suited for a 4-3 defense. Rex Ryan drafted him, and he runs a 3-4. So why are we going to take these guys out of position to do other things? We know they're football players, but let's give them their confidence, and let's give our players their strengths. Let's let them do what they do best. Let's not change nothing. I believe Sean McDermott realizes that, and he's going to do everything that his players does best to put us in the right position to win some ball games.
No, I totally agree with you on that. Use the player's ability to your liking, to your advantage. Exactly. LaShawn McCoy, how many times probably I could count on one hand the amount of times he actually got a screen play, and you saw him in Philadelphia. Not that they always did it, but he's the type of guy where if you have a running back like that, you're going to utilize him in a passing game where you use a screen, or like you said with Watkins, use Watkins on a screen on the outside,
Right.
and when Rex was there, Rex always talked about how he loves having this kid in Sammy Watkins at the wide receiver position. And sure, Watkins was injured for a lot of Rex's stint there. That's not solely Rex's fault. I mean, it's not Rex's fault at all, but it was just an unfortunate scenario. But even when he was there, without Rex, when Nate Hackett was there, the question mark was quarterback at that time, because Watkins wasn't getting the ball as much as he should have at that point either, because they couldn't throw to him or they just didn't scheme for him. So, like you said, McDermott has to address that, and I think he will address that, and it plans on addressing that, with the offensive coordinating, with the defensive coordinating, even with the special teams, because, Danny Crossman does a really good job too. So you're getting players that are not only versatile on the defensive side of the ball, but are versatile in the special teams aspect. Like a guy like Lorenzo Alexander last year, like a guy like Zach Brown this year, drafting a guy like Tre'Davious White, who had 3 punt returns in his collegiate career at LSU. So versatility is a key too. Versatility, humbleism, consistency are all things that we haven't heard around the Bills franchise in so long. And that's something that not only motivates me to divulge into it even more, but it should motivate fans to be, excited about what is to come. Like I said from day one, McDermott is a different type of regimen, and it's abundantly clear that everyone else who wasn't or is not part of that regimen idea is on their way out. I mean, abundantly clear with, the scouting staff and with Whaley in general. So the hype with, was it Whaley or McDermott running the show in terms of the draft? I think it was McDermott. I think it was a 70-30 percentage. I'm sure Doug was, confronted and informed on many things, but at the end of the day, McDermott and Reed had a relationship where they got a hold of each other and started setting this up. And then I believe Whaley took it to the next step to talk to, Kansas City's general manager.
Right.
So, I think you and I both agree on a abundance of things in terms of these topics. And I'm sure the fans listening right now do, but if you don't, make sure you go over to the BSN 716 page, let your voice be heard. Go over to the BSN BuffaHolics page and let your voice be heard. I always want feedback, and I'm going to speak on behalf of you too, Rich. I know you want the same thing. Everyone does at the network. So for all you listeners, let your voice be heard. Go tweet us. Go comment on our Instagram post. Just don't hesitate for a second, to not voice your opinion. But, with that said, there's been so many topics we've discussed today and that we've discussed overall on the entire network. I want to end it on the last topic of the fact, and that was, something you brought up. You brought up the idea of the linebacker position not being filled fully to the potential of Zach Brown. And I'm going to quarter debate with you only because, they go out and they get the Boston College linebacker and Bobby, the Bobby, our IG operator, put up a highlight film on him. And from what I saw, man, he wants to hit. He doesn't care the size of you. He doesn't care who you are. He wants to hit you. So you don't always see that kind of tenacity. And granted, it's a highlight film. You need to wait to see what you see on the field in terms of being in that blue, red, and white and then having that Bills logo. But I think you don't maybe equate the level of talent you had with the Zach Brown or the correlation that Zach and Preston had in that defensive scheme, but you have a new scheme. You're going back to a scheme that a lot of the players already know, with Jarrett Hughes, Kyle Williams, Marcel Darius, and like you said, Shaq played in college. So you have that, and then you add on top of that a guy like Milano, who is a hard-nosed hitter, who played in Boston College, who wants to show his worth in the NFL. And so, like I was saying, you lose the experience with Brown, but you gain the young talent and the inexperience that you can mold. So that's where I'm going to just agree to disagree with you. I'd love to hear your take on that and your opinion of what I see as that.
I mean, I'm not sure if we replaced Zach Brown with the draft picks that we had. That's just my opinion. I like Milano. I seen the tape. He seemed like a fearless hitter. He seemed like he has some range. He has some sideline to sideline ability. I'm pretty sure that's what attracted Coach Sean McDermott to Milano and Vallejo as well. They both seem like similar type of players. They both about 6 foot, 6'1", between 220 and 230 pounds.
Yep.
I'm not sure they're big enough to play the position. That kind of worries me a little bit. They're kind of light. I'm not sure if they're ready to take on that role. They may have the instincts, they may have the coverage ability, but I'm just not sold with a late round draft pick coming in and playing uh, a weak side linebacker position in the NFL. So that's just my opinion. I know we got Roman Humber, I believe. He's another special teams guy. He doesn't have too much starting experience, so I'm not sold on him either. It's a little concern to me, but not major. Sean McDermott obviously he knows what's important in his defense and his scheme. He elected to go cornerback. Obviously, when if you heard Sean McDermott during the press conferences, during the luncheon, cornerback and defensive back was a necessity, was a position of need. And obviously he felt he was comfortable with the linebacking corps to add uh, linebackers towards the back end of the draft. I will say this though. I know Preston Brown and Reggie Ragland, he said, was battling for that middle linebacker spot. Is there a possibility after Sean McDermott see what he sees on the field that the more athletic out of Preston Brown or Reggie Ragland take over that weak side linebacker spot and have one of them be a mainstay
Yeah,
middle linebacker instead of backing up another?
yeah, I think you're going to see, whether it's Brown, Ragland, Milano, or the other draft pick they got.
Earl?
Yeah, yep. Vallejo or however the pronunciation of that is. I think you're going to see one of those linebackers fill
Right.
a role of a Kuechly like potential. I think McDermott's gonna search for that, just like he's gonna search for his Josh Norman in the secondary. Whether he has that in his first round draft pick, whether he has that in Sharice Wright, who they just recently signed, whether they have that in Darby or even
Seymour.
Cromartie or Seymour. Yeah, I mean, so he's got a bunch of he's going to take whoever the best player is, obviously, and put them in that Norman role and put them in that Kuechly role because that's the type of defense he's trying to use.
Right.
So I think, yes, Frazier is running the shots in terms of being the defensive coordinator, but McDermott's going to have a role and say, this is what I want, this is how I want us to run it. Are you okay running that? And I think, Frazier's going to jump on board because, he was brought on for a reason with the experience he has. Same thing with Dennison. And then obviously Crossman has the same experience as well. So, like you said, they might not have filled it to what the potential that they could have, but
Right.
especially, addressing the other needs they did so early, there was only so much room they had to draft that position. So that's my take on it. I think we both see both sides. I'm sure the listeners see both sides as well. But with that said, I've appreciated having you on the show today, man. And I did real quick just want to break some news, which obviously will be really revealed in more essence, but Lorenzo Alexander actually made the top 100 at number 91. So I'm sure a lot of fans and listeners right now are going to hear that, in the next day, probably before this segment is uploaded or put on the network. But I just wanted to, break that. So 91, not bad after coming in as a free agent. So there's a reason we signed him, and that's the reason I think he's going to, utilize his potential as well in terms of McDermott using him. But with that said, once again, I've appreciated having you on, man. I've appreciated, your take on everything. I definitely want to get you on here again, and I'm hoping that someday soon I can jump over on Trendsetters and give you a little bit of this too. But listeners, our saying, Akeem's, if you don't know him, get to know him. And then most of all, how I end every segment. So with that said, I'm going to end it the best way I can and the most efficient way I can. For all you BuffaHolics, all you Bills fanatics, and all you Sabres fanatics and Buffalonians in general, whether it's Bills related or not, make sure you always, I repeat, always stay woke. All right, man. I appreciate that. I'll edit that later tonight, and you'll be hearing that tomorrow or something.
Yes, man. Blew it out of the box, man. That was awesome.
Yeah, man. Yo, link up with me sometime if you want to do a Trendsetters or something.
Yeah, man. We're going to do it. We're going to do it. Definitely.
All
I
right, man.
appreciate you.
Hey, man. I appreciate you. I'll keep in touch.
When is it going to, you going to have it on the show as well? You going to have the audio?
What, this?
Yeah, or it's
Yeah,
just gonna be live.
no, so what it is it I convert it only to audio. This is kind of just like a lot of the time I'll cut the FaceTime, but it doesn't matter if it's
Right.
on, but it's going to go
Yeah.
audio. What we really need to do though is we should figure out like maybe one segment instead of putting it on the network. I do a co-host with you on the page, and then I just do my own
Mhm.
segment on the network. So we can definitely work with stuff. I know you and I personally were the only ones really, putting stuff
Doing shit.
together,
Doing shit.
which
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. You said
but
doing
I mean,
shit.
that's the case, and we know the grind's got to get going, and you always got good content, so I definitely wanted to get you on here, and I'm trying to get everyone on at least once,
Of
but I
course.
definitely want to link up again with you, especially if some big news breaks anytime soon,
Hey,
or especially when the season starts up.
when you're done with the audio, when you're done doing what you just shoot me a message, just send me the link. Promote it.
Oh, for the audio,
Yeah,
yeah, I'll just I might be able to just upload the audio on YouTube. I'll figure something out.
if you could.
I got you, man. I got you.
All right, bro. Talk to
All
you
right.
soon.
All right. Bye.